Thank you, Mr Dowd. It's a pleasure to wind up for the SNP in this debate, and good to see you in your place. I do feel for our Minister today. He's been the thinnest of blue lines, and look forward to hearing his response too, as much as I don't necessarily have a great deal of hope for the substance of it. I do have much respect for him personally in the position he finds himself in today. I would pay tribute to the organisers of the petition and the 178,000 people who have signed it. The members for Eastern Bartonshire, Ochil and South Perthshire, Coatbridge and Chryson and Bellis Hill, and Linlithgow and East Falkirk all made very solid contributions to the debate, as did a number of colleagues from all perspectives and all points of the House, except perhaps the government benches, though we look forward to the Minister, as I say. And on brass tacks, the SNP supports this petition. We want to see evidence-based policy making. I think it's important to find out how we got to where we are if we're to plot a way forward to the solutions. But I would voice that support with a wee note of caution that I hope I can gently express some reservation over the perspective that the wording reveals. That, I quote, the impact Brexit has had on this country and its citizens. Well, for the avoidance of doubt, my country is Scotland. The United Kingdom is not my country. The United Kingdom is a state. It is a union comprised of 4 countries. And perspective is not a synonym for a difference of opinion. We see this from a different place. Scotland has a very clear European perspective. My party is the most pro-European party in this Parliament. But I also have a particular neuralgia with the phrase, this country and its citizens. Mr Dowd, to my mind, the people who were most affected by leaving the EU in the way that we did were EU nationals, resident in these islands, who had their lives turned upside down, who had rights that they had come to these islands to live, work, study, marry into our communities. They had them taken away, and they didn't even get a vote in it. Now, I am deeply proud of my party's ethos that if you're in Scotland, you're one of us. It's not obligatory, but you're very welcome if you want to be. I am deeply proud of the fact that the Scottish Parliament has legislated to move voting eligibility in Scottish elections, the ones we control, from nationality to residence. Now, that's a queer sort of nationalism in a continental historic European sense, but Scotland's tragedy for 250 years was we exported our people. And it was freedom of movement from the European Union that started to get it back up again, and I am deeply proud that anyone who lives in Scotland is one of us as far as the Scottish Government is concerned. That was not the case in the EU referendum. In the independence referendum in 2014, the Scottish Government quite specifically chose the European franchise for voting entitlement in order to broaden that eligibility as much as we legally could at the time. We've since broadened it further. The United Kingdom Government, despite amendments from the SNP team at that point to broaden that franchise, chose quite specifically to say 2 to 2.6 million people living in these islands, part of our communities, part of our families, paying taxes here. It is demonstrably true that EU immigrants pay far more taxes to the UK Exchequer than they took back in services. But the UK had a debate about your place in our community, about your position in our economy, about your role here, but you're not going to say in that because you're foreign, you're not one of us. That is a deeply ugly, exclusive politics, which I do hate. So I'm quite sure it's unintentional in the wording of the petition, but its citizens, I think, really should have a wider perspective than it does. Also, I'd like to see mention of the fact that the UK's exit from the European Union has damaged European solidarity. It's damaged sincere cooperation. It was based on an exclusive idea that somehow the UK was subjected to EU laws, which we had every part in producing. So I do support this petition, but I do have some reservations of that wording. And the SNP is the most pro-EU party in this Parliament. My position, Mr Dowd, in the front bench is as Europe and EU accession spokesperson, very deliberately, because our mission is to get an independent Scotland back into the European Union. We have a clear constitutional agenda. And as that independent state in the European Union, I believe we'll thrive. But it's really important, I say, to a UK audience and the European campaigns that exist in every community up and down these islands. The SNP simultaneously, at the same time, wants to see the UK do well. I don't want to see the UK have a bad time. I believe that the UK should be as close to, if not part of, the EU as possible in all its programmes, in all its forms. I want to see the UK have a functioning relationship that secures peace in Northern Ireland, that secures trade, that secures the research-intensive industrial policy that the EU has that the UK should be part of, but presently risks losing. The UK is going to be our closest friend and our closest market, and vice versa. I want to see the UK do well. If you don't believe that, it'll also make our independence project easier, because the EU we seek to join will have that deep and close relationship with the UK, I hope. It's not just for its own sake. But I have been struck through this debate, Mr. Dowd, that some of the contributions were frankly a little backward-looking. How one's constituency voted, I think, isn't relevant anymore for all of us. Now, Scotland voted massively to remain. Of course we did. That's a matter of fact. The UK as a whole voted to leave. That's also a fact. So I think we need to talk about the democratic deficit implicit within the UK right now, which is demonstrated by the fact that Scotland was removed against our will from the European Union. Now, that's not the battles of the past. That's the discussions of the future. And I think a backward-looking attitude to this actually impedes us from finding solutions to the problems we're now experiencing. I've said repeatedly in debates in this House, I want to see the UK have a close relationship with the EU, and I will work towards that with anyone who wants to do so. And I think the Windsor framework, which I will pay tribute to, is a pragmatic step in that sort of direction, and let's, for goodness sake, see more of that rather than backward-looking attitudes. I'm also, for the avoidance of doubt, not interested in rerunning the EU referendum. That was a long time ago. The world's changed. I'm not interested in overturning the result. I respect everyone who voted leave, wherever they voted leave, for whatever reason. And I think people who voted leave were entitled to believe the promises that were made to them. They were entitled to believe the good faith of the politicians and others who made those promises. But the reality, frankly, Mr. Dowd, is that the promises that were made have not been delivered. Now, there may be reasons why they've not been delivered, but that's why I think an inquiry would be useful in ventilating that. Now, who can forget the greatest hits? There will be no downside, only a considerable upside. Nobody is talking about leaving the single market. Of course, we'll keep Erasmus. We hold all the cards. All of those things, and 350 million a week for the NHS. Who wouldn't vote for that? It's remarkable it wasn't higher result. So that is what I think needs to be ventilated, Mr. Dowd, and that's why I support this petition in its aims, because the vote was presented essentially as a risk-free, consequence-free vote. Everything you like, you'll keep. Everything you don't like or don't understand will recede from your life. Well, the reality has been really very different. I'd also, and I would expand the scope of the inquiry the petition seeks to have into the techniques that the Leave campaign used. Because I'm concerned that we have an ongoing vulnerability to such recklessness. I'd like to see a proper review of electoral law, data protection, campaign financing, particularly the role of dark money, the remarkable lack of a single Leave campaign manifesto to hold the Leave campaign to account. A variety of promises were made, some in good faith, some perhaps less so, but they've not been delivered. We also need a proper look at the powers of the Electoral Commission and the role of broadcasters and internet providers in public information in future campaigns, because I think we do have an ongoing vulnerability to recklessness, let's call it that. So we support this petition, but I would caution an inquiry of this sort will deliver a degree of truth if it happens, and I'd have to say it's at the top end of expectation that it might. But the people out there need answers, they need progress, they need solutions right now. I think we should establish truth. I think that's a good thing to do in and of itself. I think we should ensure we fix any future vulnerabilities, ongoing vulnerabilities, but people need answers now. And I'm not interested in a blame game. So the people who are struggling in my district in Stirling, an area bigger than Luxembourg, the heart of Scotland, we're suffering right now of the consequences of leaving the European Union. My farmers can't get their crops planted and can't get them harvested either. We have a crippling agricultural labour shortage. We have a crippling hospitality shortage as well, which is deeply relevant to my community. The NHS is short of staff. Creative touring people are also struggling. We have a lively music scene. And young people on student exchanges are finding it more difficult, more complicated, and more expensive. So let's have specific sectoral visas for that freedom of movement in and out of individual sectors to give them solutions right now that will actually solve these problems. To universities up and down Scotland and the UK suffering about the uncertainty over continued engagement in Horizon Europe, let's join Horizon Europe. It is on the table in Brussels right now. The Windsor framework has gone away to building that trust. Let's build it further in everybody's mutual advantage. I'm not talking about reversing Brexit. I'm talking about dealing with the problems that we have right now. For our food importers and exporters, we need a veterinary agreement to make sure that the flow across the borders is as frictionless as it can be. And for our SMEs, we need single market membership to remove the barriers that have been put up by the recent events that we've suffered. So the SNP supports this petition. The SNP supports EU membership for Scotland as an independent state, but we also want to see the UK have a close relationship with the EU, because that'll go away, not to apportion blame for how we got here, but to actually fix the problems that we're all experiencing. I view that as a common endeavour, and I'll engage with anybody from all points of the compass to see that happen. But we support this petition, Mr Dowd, and I look forward to hearing our Minister's response about it. Thank you.